Hello, kiddos. So today we got a kind of a really short lesson to follow up on the heels of our talking about the victory of William McKinley in the election of 1896. So we've already kind of given you a preview or a spoiler of the fact that there's a war coming down the pike. And if you're going to fight a war, you need a military. So let's take a little side trip back again to that ever ongoing issue that we've been discussing now for over a full unit. That's the need to modernize the US Navy. But you're saying to yourself, wait, we already talked about that. And like, aren't they modern now? Yes, they are, but we still need to talk a little bit about that process. So, something to consider here. There are three factors that lead to the modernization of the US Navy. One of them we've already discussed in great detail, and that is Krupp's big guns. Okay. The fear of the Krupp guns and what that means to America was the initial driving push to modernize the Navy. But there's a couple of other ones as well. The Virginius incident, which we're going to talk about tomorrow, in which a U.S. privately owned ship was pulled over by the Spanish Navy and every American on board was executed. That was an act of war that was not followed through because, quite frankly, President Grant realized that the U.S. Navy would get its keister kicked if we tried fighting the Spanish. And then there's number three, what we're going to talk about today. That, of all things, is a book. A book written by an American naval officer in the 1880s, an officer named Alfred T. Mahan. His book had as its central hypothesis, or its idea, its stated belief, that if you look at the history of the world, to all great and successful nations, militarily and commercially, they all have one thing in common. That was a powerful navy. And he started all the way back to the Phoenicians and worked his way up to the modern British Empire, including the Romans, who, even though they themselves didn't have a great navy, they bought a great navy by basically hiring ships from Greece and Cilicia and making it work for them. These three things, Mahan's book, the Virginius incident, and Krupp's big guns, were the major impetus for the War Department to push the modernization of the Navy. Now, somebody asked in class, why is it always the Navy? Why not the Army? Well, let's think about this. The only two real direct threats to an invasion for America, like on land, are Canada and Mexico. Yeah, really not so much there. Okay. So, after nearly 2 decades and tens of millions of back then dollars spent, the United States had modernized itself. And we're going to look briefly at that modernization and the great ships it had produced. Behold, the Squadron of Evolution, the evolving change of the U.S. Navy. So here's the first one. This is a U.S. Navy cruiser. Now notice, it's pretty darn impressive. You got some guns there. You got guns there. You got guns there. It's a metal boat. Ooh, it's a metal boat. And it looks like a real boat. The problem is that this is 1890 and there's still sails on a giant metal boat with steam engines. Why do you have so much rigging and sails on a steamship? Yeah, okay. Let's on the next one. The USS Dolphin. Yeah, yeah, wait a minute. You notice it's a Navy ship, and if you look, you can see that it doesn't have any guns anywhere. Yeah, you have a Navy ship with no guns. Oh, wait a second. I'm sorry. Look over here. You can look really close. There's a hand cranked Gatling gun in the front. Yeah, that's not going to work too well either. Oh, this one, the USS Vesuvius, the great dynamite ship. It's got guns. It's got big guns. It's got real big guns. Um, it's kind of small though, and yeah. Um, so another thing you may notice here is that these guns are actually mounted inside the deck of the boat. They're not mounted on the deck, they're mounted in the deck. So, in order to shoot the guns, you literally have to turn the entire boat around to shoot them. And The Vesuvius is an interesting experiment in a naval vessel. It was designed by the U.S. Army. Yeah, why is the Army designing a Navy ship? Not really quite sure. Their design focused on these three guns here, which instead of using a shell, you loaded the tubes up with dynamite. You put like some kind of a projectile down on top of it. You lit the dynamite and boom, it fired it out. The other problem is that the entire deck of the ship is made of wood and there's dynamite sitting right underneath it. So if somebody hits it, the whole ship blows up. Yeah, not so much. And then there is America's great battleships. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, so this one is admittedly looking formidable. It's got giant guns on it. It's got some more guns down there. That's pretty cool. That's a big boat. Look at that. Look at that big boat. Big guns in the front, big guns on the sides. Literally on the sides. There's one small problem here to talk about, though. This design was actually purchased from the British. The British abandoned it shortly after construction because what they realized was the way the guns were set up on the sides, in the wrong battle situation, you would actually shoot your own boat. Like the gun turret would shoot the ship it was on. And if you turned it to the side, it would occasionally, if you fired all the guns on the side at once, it would almost displace the boat and knock it over. So even though America modernized and spent loads of cash, our Navy was kind of dumb. By the late 1890s, the United States had settled on this. This is a design for the USS Olympia. Now, notice it fixed some of the other problems. There's really no more sails and riggings. It also does not have the guns hanging off the side of the boat. The guns are squarely in the front here and on the sides. And they are facing front so that when you fight, you'll actually be able to hit something. This, however, while being a battleship for America, is technically qualified as a battle cruiser. It's a little bit on the small side compared to the British ships, but that's okay. So, this is the modernized U.S. Navy that will come into play for the Great War that is coming. Okay, very short, very sweet, very much to the point. Peace and love. Peace and love.